welcome everybody. We're so excited to have you for a Texas NARO presentation on one of the items that's key to success in our industry, which is the two-year tool. My name is Mark Thiele. I'm the interim president and CEO of the Houston Housing Authority, and I'm excited to be joined by some outstanding technical experts on the line. Director of our local HUD field office, Lorraine Walls, and ably assisted in doing the presentation today from the same office, Chuck Bunkers and Wendy Golden. Do you guys want to say a little bit more about yourselves?
Chuck Bunkers, I'm a project manager specialist in the field office here, covering multiple PHAs throughout the state, and we're always available to help you if you need something, so feel free to call us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Wendy Golden. I'm a portfolio management specialist in the Houston field office. I also cover a number of PHAs within the jurisdiction. And piggybacking off of what Mr. Bunker said, anytime you need some help or technical assistance, just feel free to give us a call.
And ably directed by Lorraine Walls. If you have any comments, Lorraine?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. We're always here to help you and provide technical assistance and information. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy the session.
So I'll introduce our team too, but I do want to take a chance. I don't have this opportunity very often to tell you what outstanding partners our local field office is to us. They really exemplify providers of technical assistance, good advice, heads up, experience, and really demonstrate what it is to have an outstanding partner in an oversight agency. We're thrilled that they have the time to make themselves available today to make this presentation to you on behalf of Texas NARO, but really an example of what your field office should be as well in terms of deep technical expertise and available on the phone for guidance as we move forward in this ever complicated world. So I see that more people are joining us. Let me just say again, I'm Mark Thiele, interim president and CEO of the Houston Housing Authority. I've been in housing. I'm a houser and for 20 years. I've been here at the Houston Housing Authority for 10 years, deeply devoted to the residents that we serve in this outstanding city. And I'm ably assisted on the phone by a champion of the residents we serve, Jonathan Zimmerman, formerly of FADA, formerly of NARO at the national level, been an outstanding policy contributor. Anything else you want to say, Jonathan, by way of introduction?
No, that was very nice, Mark. Thank you.
And Alan Issa, who's one of our rising stars in our REID Real Estate Investment Development, but the policy part of that, as we continue to try to learn the lessons that HUD is teaching us and apply them shrewdly and efficiently to the maximum benefit of the residents we serve here in Houston Harris County. I did want to give you guys an opportunity because we're not a huge group. I think I see 5 others on the phone line. If you don't mind, maybe a short introduction that helps us a little bit understand who it is we're talking to and customize the presentation just a little bit. You don't have to say much, or you can say a bit if you want. From Edinburgh Housing, do you want to introduce yourself? You might be on mute right now. In any event, not required. Edia Madero, did I say that right?
I think Edie got sidetracked there. How about if we go to the next?
Yeah, sure, for sure. Jonna Floyd.
Hi, yes, this is Jonna. I'm with Mesquite Housing, and I am an occupancy technician.
Outstanding. I actually, when I started in the industry, that was what I started at. For us, we were calling it a housing specialist. But Welcome to the group. I hope you'll learn a lot and take advantage of this conference.
Yeah, definitely.
Outstanding. And there's a Bueno, but perhaps it's a Bueno on the phone.
Hi, this is Aurora Bueno, and I'm the manager of Housing and Community Services in Mesquite for Mesquite Housing.
Outstanding. Thank you again for joining us and for having your team with us.
Absolutely.
Mark, the Edinburgh Housing Authority and EDIA have posted in the chat section if you want to be there talking in there.
Oh, okay. And that, yes, from Odessa Housing Authority. Bernadine Spears' shop. I appreciate you guys pointing out to us. First of all, I'm a huge fan of hers. Second of all, that we do have a chat feature, and that sometimes what happens is folks engage via the chat feature as we do our presentation. We'd encourage you to do that. Alan will be watching the chat for Chuck and I. Last person is only identified by a phone number, and that phone number is 1-432-333-1088. So if you're not shy, we'd love to know who you are, but it's not required. In any event, we can move along. Chuck is going to take the first half of the presentation. So I'll hand it over to you, Chuck, and then I'll share my screen afterwards and try to take us home. And we're both open to questions. Go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, welcome everybody. Just wanted to do a quick, brief overview on the tool. Hopefully you've been working with it. Everybody's scenario is different. So we're just trying to do kind of a recap, a highlight overview on it. Your best bet is to work on your own tool and then contact your PMS in your field office, send it to them and go over it with them, talk about it with them if they haven't shared one with you already. That's your best way to do it. But we're going to cover today just some of the main things to keep in mind as you work your way through it. You know, it used to be you had to use that old HP and do a bunch of calculations to figure things out, but HUD has come up with a simplified 2-year tool. And we can probably go farther than 2 years now on it because they've projected out to 3 and 4 on it. But when they first came up with it, it was known as their 2-year tool, and it's been great for everyone. So we're keeping it at that. So our agenda today is going to kind of be the tool overview, some of the key areas to look at on it. We're going to do a brief how to use, how to analyze some of the information that it produces for you. And then we're going to cover those key takeaways, and we'll have questions and answers with time permitting there at the end. As we said, I'm Chuck Bunkers and Mark is assisting me. So we're moving on. Pretty much the tool was introduced as a way for the PHAs to kind of determine how they could best utilize their HCV program, make projections into the future, saying, if I do this today, what's going to happen at the end of the year, what's going to happen next year, that type of thing. And there's a lot of variables that go into it. And as I said, everybody's got a different scenario, so you need to plug into it what pertains to you and best describes you to get the answer you're looking for. This is not right down to the T, the 2-year tool. It's going to give you just a pretty close estimate of what it's going to be. It's got to be using accurate numbers and that kind of thing. So whatever you plug into it, it's going to tell you this is the outcome at the end. So you play with it. You can't do anything. You can't change anything in it. There's only certain boxes that you're able to input anything into. And by changing that, you're able to get a different scenario to come up for you. There's the HCV tool site, which tells you some training videos and different things like that that are out there. As you can see, by clicking on this link, if you go out to this website here under HUD.gov under the program offices, and by clicking on each of these links here, it'll give you what's under there. When you want to get your 2-year tool, you're going to click on this. It will open it up. The training videos out there are very good. They are real short and to the point, and they give you a real good understanding of what's going on with the tool in that particular area of it. I supplied to you the 2-year tool guide. It hasn't been updated lately, but it's still real good at getting you to where you need to go, and you can play with it from there. When you click on the training videos, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get the how-to as well as all the different areas. By clicking on them, it'll go to YouTube and bring up that little short video for you. From, like it says, analysis of the administration fee, your leasing charts, budgets, you name it. It's all there. All the way down to the tool of tools, which are some new added things. You got case studies that'll give you scenarios. It may be similar to yours. It may not even be close, but it just gives you ideas, different things to think about as you're working through the tool. And this is the best place to go get hands-on experience with it if you're new to it. When you run that 2-year tool, you should always start by downloading a new 2-year tool each month. And to do that, you go to where I showed you, you click on the 2-year tool, which is this is the link to it. It's going to take you to an Excel link. And then when you click on here, it's going to open up the 2-year tool for you. I didn't go into that in detail because I figure if you follow this, it's going to get you right to where you need to go. And the reason you need to really go with a new 2-year tool each month is because that tool is updated and modified constantly. So you always want the latest numbers in that tool when you pull it up. This may get modified twice in some days. It's usually, I watch it, it's at least every other day, times every day. But always start with that new tool every month so that you got the latest. I've seen where people, they'll download it once and then each month they add to it. But you don't want to do that because it hasn't been updated with all the updates added by HUD on a daily or every other day basis. You also want to make sure you download the latest VMS. You want the tool to have the most accurate information in it that it can, because if you aren't putting in accurate information, you're not going to get the projection that you maybe thought you were expecting. The way you get to that VMS report is, through your secure systems. You generate a report. You're going to do the data collection report. It's going to want your PHA number. And you always want to do from the first of the year. So it's always January of this year to whatever month is last uploaded. As you're aware, you must report into FMC VMS by the 22nd of every month. They take a couple of days to go through your information, make sure it's accurate, all makes sense. Then they will upload it into VMS. So that report it probably is the 27th or so of each month that it's updated, and it's always through the 22nd of the prior month, or the end of that last month, I guess you would say, because you're uploading prior month's data by the 22nd of the month. So after you gather that report, you download it into an Excel spreadsheet, save it on your desktop or wherever you want to save it. And then you're going to go back to your tool, and under Access Additional Tools, you can see where it'll automatically, by clicking on the VMS data upload page, it will automatically upload that VMS information that you just downloaded. And the reasons you want to do that every month is because if you made adjustments for 3 months ago, this month, you want it to pick up in the tool, and VMS should be accurate and will pick up any changes or corrections that were made in the prior months up through the most recent upload. And so that's the reason to always go out and get a new BMS report. Okay, so we're just going to cover briefly a scenario here that the yellow boxes on the tool are the only spots where you can actually add something. If it's yellow, you can change that field. So you need to know what your success rate is and plug it in. The tool will automatically default to what the national average is, and success rate for national is 70. But on this example, they feel 68 was better, so they changed it to 68. It affects all the calculations in the tool by changing any of these. PIC will automatically send to the tool what your EOP percentage was as of the last 12 months. And so they've rounded up here to 9%. You could put the exact 8.58 if you so desired. 9 is close enough, 8 would be close enough, 8.5, whichever works for you. Also, you plug in your percent of them that lease up in the first 30 days, the percent that leases up in the 30 to 60 day range, the percent leased up in 60 to 90, and percent leased in 90 to 120, and so on. This always totals 100%. If it doesn't total 100%, it will highlight in red and say you need to correct it to make it equal 100%. That all comes into play with the tool and how it takes vouchers issued each month. If you issued 100 last month, it's going to say next month 11% of those 100 should lease up in the first 30 days. Then half of the next in the 30 to 60 day, and so on down the road. That all plays into the calculations and helps you determine how many vouchers you can safely issue without putting yourself into a shortfall scenario. Okay. In this example, I just wanted to show you that you always have your UMAs never changes. That's how many unit months available for the entire year, basically your vouchers that you have available to you. This is how many you're actually leasing each month. Normally, this will always be below this. If you have a high reserve, it's okay early in the year to go above here and exceed, with the intent by the end of the year to be back below the unit months available. So if you have high reserves early in the year, over lease, well, not, I guess you call it over lease, to where you're putting probably more vouchers on the street than you really have available to you. But remember, by the end of the year, you have to be back below that. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay those back. Anything you're over and above come the end of the year that exceeds this, you purchase back. Again, the yellow column is the one you're able to add numbers to do your projection type of thing. So I came up with a scenario to keep you pretty much within your UMAs on a monthly basis. And HUD's thing is stay utilized. Keep yourself as close to 98% as you can. We want to help everybody we can. And the best way to do it is keep them out there and just keep issuing until you're getting up to your UMAs and attempt not to exceed it. So again, I just point this out that it's okay to exceed for a while as long as come year end, you're back where you need to be. Okay, in this scenario, this is showing they're only using 86% of what they have available. Again, HUD wants you closer to 98. So it gives you current year, and based on what you're doing right now, it also gives you what's going to happen to you next year. And so again, keep yourself as fully utilized as you can and spend that money available. The thing is, if you don't spend it, there's a chance that HUD could come back and take that from you. If you look on your 2-year tool at P12, that cell tells you the excess reserves that are subject to offset. You should be monitoring that box from January or February on. As soon as that becomes available, okay, I'm sorry here. I got a computer that keeps resending me emails over and over and over, and I have no clue why that is. Bear with me. But in this scenario here, your excess reserves that are subject to offset are going to be 526,000. And if HUD should decide to offset, they're going to take that away from you. They take that away from you, you don't get it back. That's the problem. Once they offset, and as we all know, some years HUD is offsetting, some years they're not. We haven't heard anything about this year yet. Anybody can guess, but at this point, they have not made an announcement. I believe they offset last year, and so they may do every other year. They could do every year. It's hard to say, but you don't want to get caught with excessive reserves subject to offset. So always watch that P12 cell and be aware of it. Because you lose it, it's gone. Okay. We're rattling on here, so I think you're coming up next here for me, Mark, on this. I'm going to start sharing and turn it over to you.
Let's see here. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first of all, again, thank you, Chuck. Outstanding presentation. I tried to get in on the chat a little bit. I think that the videos are excellent, and I think that Chuck makes a good point about restarting from zero every month. And this is the part of housing where I think it really is kind of important to geek out a little bit. We're gonna nerd a little bit on this stuff, but this is the way that we learn how to help the maximum amount of families within our authority. And so we take it tremendously seriously. Like I mentioned, I have Jonathan and Alan on the phone, and they are part of a team of us here at the Houston Housing Authority that work on that include policy experts, the voucher program experts, finance experts. And not everybody obviously has that opportunity, but I would encourage even the smallest housing authorities to have more than one person. With anything very important, it's good to have multiple people who understand it. There's always somebody learning about it, and somebody who can kind of look in and see, you know, if something happens, a typo or something goes off pattern. You know, sometimes those of us who are doing it for a while might miss something that might be obvious to a fresh set of eyes. So, you know, basically within what I consider to be the fundamental part of the tool, there are 2 pages. This is the top portion that we're looking at. We'll look at the bottom portion. I'm not going to go over it to the nth detail, but you know, a couple points are on the left side, about halfway down. If there is set aside funding, I think we're still at the point where that would need to be manually populated for your current year to be included. You know, other things that are key and have been talked about a little bit already, monitoring your success rate. That is to say, that amount of issued vouchers at least successfully. Here it shows at 70%. Obviously want to shoot for higher. I think a good rule of thumb is 75% or higher, and looking for ways to support success when we issue to families. Just as a, you know, as a economic point on that, the most expensive thing we do is lease somebody up. So to the extent that you can increase that, you also save dollars. You're not doing it on families that don't succeed. Annual turnover rate, clearly something you want to pay close attention to. You want to be conservative with that and overestimate it slightly. But you really want to hit that number as close to on the head. In every case, that's what you're trying to do. Moving down right beneath that from under program projection variables, which are right there in the middle of the screen. I wonder, can you see my cursor? Time from, from issuance is another one that's important. Some people just use the default. I think it's important to have this as accurate as possible. End result, you heard Chuck mention 98%. I think really for the best operators, you're trying to shoot for 100% without going one over, right? Which is a very difficult job to do, and we're not always perfect at it. But what we want to do is help the maximum number of families. So making sure you're really on top of those variables helps to make sure that you hit the mark on behalf of your family. So it's not just an intellectual exercise. It is all about helping families in your community and keeping the max amount of subsidy in your community and not taken back in these various recaptures that Chuck was referring to earlier. So there we go, bottom portion. So again, I think of it as 2 pages for the physical version or electronic version. You'd be scrolling down, some quick, guidance to where you have a focus on. You have the opportunity to analyze admin fees, expenses, reserves, to determine, are there any of these variables that you should be concerned about? And of course, at all times, we are very concerned about them, but looking for trends. And HUD makes that helpful below where you have the red to indicate, hey, bring the eye over, in this case, the cumulative annual lease or monthly UML, where there are issues that should draw the eye. And what you're doing, of course, is trying to project as accurately as possible into the future. So Chuck earlier in the presentation, mentioned at least 2 years. That's what you see, January of 16 in this case, and January full year, both years 16 and 17 on the bottom, with this being a projection that completes 16 and looks into 17 in this particular case. And again, you're paying attention and aiming to achieve that cumulative average 100%. One of our points of interest here is trends on the per unit cost. So that is a unit cost per month on average across your portfolio. And this helps you kind of drill down into it. In this case, what you'd see is a trending upward, and what it's showing across there really, as you start in March, you see a monthly change as it's increasing, with I think it's 1 decrease there in September, but the general trend upward, and that means across static resources. So if you weren't to have an increase in your ABA, you're seeing increases like this, then you're going to end up being able to serve less people. So that's part of that calculation that you're making. I think generally we're seeing upward pressure on the PUC nationally, and in some cases at unprecedented rates. I mean, one of the things that we battle with is a narrative here in Texas that housing is much more affordable in Texas than it is in other parts of the country, because we have such challenging housing crises in places like Hawaii, East Coast, West Coast, and Denver, among other locations. But really what it is here in Houston is less unaffordable, but only by a little bit. And that's offset to the negative by historically low subsidy for the area. So it is part of a larger picture, and having full command of figures like this help you to tell your story as you go to your legislators and ask them to increase the amount of funding directed to your jurisdiction. Some of the key questions you might consider as you're looking at analysis like this would be current month's PUC. Is it indicative of cost trends, or is there an aberration? What you see here is that upward pressure throughout. Does the 3-month rolling average significantly differ from the last actual PUC? Does the graph indicate a trend that using the last actual PUC would omit? And so, there are, occasions when you do have aberrations, you want to be able to, kind of quickly identify the difference. And that is, by kind of getting your hands dirty with the data and becoming very familiar with it. Do the graphs indicate a need to address rent burden by examining payment or subsidy standards? And that's one of the things that we are constantly looking at here in Houston. We have 4 payment standards. We are trying to incent families towards opportunity and disincent them away from concentrated poverty. And we've been doing that for years. But it is the kind of thing that good analysis can point you towards. Other things, I mentioned before about the rising PUC, not necessarily a bad indicator, but it is something that you need to take into account as you look into the future. And as I mentioned, whether or not you'll be in a situation, all other variables held constant, to serve less families rather than more, because that's the balance, right? Do you serve more folks more deeply, more folks less deeply, or less folks more deeply? And that's the kind of thing that you're trying to analyze and deliver appropriately to your community versus need. So what you'd be analyzing in that case is potential changes to payment standards, market increase, higher cost, lower vacancy, or a drop or decrease in tenant income. And Alan or Jonathan, if you have any color that you guys want to add as I'm going through this, I always appreciate it. Moving to cash management, fairly dense table here. What it does is it helps the public housing authorities to track cash status for the monthly HAP obligations and disbursements from HUD, as well as an estimated monthly HUD held reserve. The monthly HAP disbursements that the housing authorities receive from HUD FMC are not necessarily the same as 1/12 of the ABA. And so if a housing authority only relies on HUD's cash management formula and the HAP disbursement generated from it as the amount of funds available to lease vouchers, they may end up serving fewer families than they could otherwise serve with the total available HAP funding for the calendar year. Finally, related to that, if a housing authority needs more funding from its total HAP budget authority and HAP reserves from HUD FMC, then the cash management formula provides. There is PAH notice 27-6 issued back in March of 2017 for the procedures to request an advance of your available funding, so long as the housing authority does not spend more than the total ABA. So here's another way that HUD illustrates its partnership by allowing you to advance on funds due to need, again, so long as you don't go into a shortfall position. This is one of my favorite ones. It's easier for smaller housing authorities to manage than for the larger ones because of the ongoing manual, but success rate tracking is really important. I'd argue that there's less room for error with smaller housing authorities because of the what I would consider a disproportionate resource challenge that you guys have versus larger authorities that may have access to additional funding through a variety of mechanisms. So we don't have enough, but I feel like our colleagues in smaller housing authorities are more challenged. So, as relative to success rate, what you're trying to do there is track it out and make sure so you can support that success rate indicator on top of the tool. How many of a universe? So if you're talking about 30 in the example there from November 2015, if 20 eventually leased and they leased their 10 in December, 5 in January, 5 in February, that totals up to the 20. So, really talking about 2/3 leasing percentage or 67%. and that obviously would be an indicator you're going to try to push that. And what are the things that you can do? Is it better information to your families about available units? Ongoing better relationships with your landlords, about what an outstanding program you have. One of the advantages, again, I think, of being a small housing authority is that you often know your community very, very well. You know the players, you have those kind of relationships, and your influence can affect perception. And sometimes it's influence with 2 or 3 folks in a smaller area that change perception or kick that success rate up and allow you to help more families faster, and also at a decrease in cost to you because of the amount of cost that you have to expend on each non-successful voucher. So here again, we kind of just say, I don't know if HUD has any comment on this, but housing authorities should really aim for a success rate of at least 75% or more for the year. And to the extent you can press that upward, do it. I think the other thing is that, you can see here that you have 5 months in each case. So again, the 10-5-5 is the first 3 of 5 months, with March and April being the 4th and 5th month, which reflects the 5 periods on the top of the tool. And if you lease somebody outside of the 150-day window, you might throw that number into the 5th category, or leased in 120 to 150 days. Or you may not experience that because perhaps the vouchers have expired in the first place. Moving to the next one on subsidy standard analysis. This provides really an easy to understand overview of what percentage of voucher assisted households in each house are paying more than 31% of income towards rent. What percent are paying 41% or more of their income towards rent? And an effort to help the housing authority continue to monitor and make arguments relative to HUD's affordability standard. Back in the day, the standard rule of thumb was not to spend more than 1/3 of your income on your housing. And we as a country have really blown through that, without having the appropriate requisite conversations nationally about what we're doing to folks. And of course, that has a disproportionate impact on the families that we serve, because they have way less resources out of which to take a much larger chunk, right? In addition to managing your program properly, I think this is, another point about making the argument to your representatives about the importance of what you do, and about the importance of appropriate funding relative to that. To take a little sidestep on that same point, again, for our smaller housing authority colleagues, I would also say that you potentially have a disproportionate voice. You're well known and beloved in your communities. Folks, you probably have a better relationship with the local congressional representatives, state representatives, than some of the larger housing authorities do, just because of how many players might be on the map in those circumstances. And so they love to hear your stories, your personal stories about the challenges that you are helping your families to meet, exceed, and overcome as a result of the tremendous service that you're providing. So, I feel like when I do these, that I don't mind, again, nerding or geeking out a little bit on the data, but I think it's really important to think back to what you're doing as an executive director. If you're a housing technician, you see yourself on a trajectory into the future, right? Right now, what you might be doing in Edinburgh is helping a certain amount of families, but over the trajectory of your career, that number of families that you assist will increase. The number of families that you are able to have impact will increase. And the extent you learn tools like this, then you are in a better position to serve them to the maximum capacity of yourself and your housing authority, but then larger to your community, which is one of the advantages of starting to learn this early and often. Is there anything, Jonathan or Alan, you guys want to add to this slide? I know know this is one of your favorites.
I'll go ahead and do that really briefly. I'm enjoying the presentation though, Mark. So on the slide that you're on the columns 4 and 5 under counts, you see 2 color codes. The blue is unit size is greater than voucher size, and the opposite, unit size is less than or equal to voucher size. This is a key thing to look at, specifically on the blue column rows, and you see they give you number and percent by bedroom, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now to bring it up, as Mark would say, into, well, what does that all mean? Well, we know it's, if you have a voucher holder who's got a 2-bedroom voucher, they're still allowed to move into a 3-bedroom dwelling unit. We're to take the utility allowance of the actual size of that dwelling unit, in this case, 3. And so long as the contract rent that you're doing rent reasonableness on, plus that 3-bedroom utility allowance, that AKA the gross rent, does not exceed the Housing Authority's payment standard, well, they're more than, and your rent reasonableness determination is done, well, then they're more than qualified to move into that apartment. However, under the same scenario, if you find that the gross rent exceeds their 2-bedroom payment standard, well, then you're going to need to issue them a voucher for the authorized number of vouchers based on your occupancy policy and the number of household members, et cetera, and have them begin the search process to, quote, right size their dwelling unit with the number of authorized vouchers. And so this helps you do that. Taking a look at that is the first step to making that determination. That's it, Mark.
Thank you. And just as a point, we realize this is going to be a fairly dense presentation, but we highly encourage you to seek our assistance, or we can direct you to others in your area. If you, certainly if you have questions, we're happy to field them. But what I've found is that what this does over time is it affects philosophy. It affects your approach to serving your community, and that is often, for the way that I've done it, best taken in the company of other experts who have seen some of it before and can give you kind of contextual advice related to it, pro and con. Other your tool analysis help. Again, I can't say enough about what HUD has done related to this. I've sort of had the opportunity to see this trajectory from when Mike Larisha came out with it, and Patrick Hatch, and I guess we're on to somebody new. Chuck just told me the other day, the folks who designed the tool, but it's an example of HUD being very thoughtful about the challenges both large and small housing authorities have, and trying to package it in a way that's quasi bite-sized. It's a lot, and I think you should congratulate yourself for continuing to come to work every day, because you're putting up with a lot, right? I mean, this example, when you look at the number of videos related to the proper use of the tool, regardless of whether this tool existed, you'd need some way of figuring all that out. And all those things that are being that you're being assisted in being trained on relative to the HUD guidance provided are critical to maximizing your scarce resources on behalf of the families that you serve. So, I appreciate the fact that HUD really committed and leaned in to doing this, and I was not kidding at all when I said that the videos are excellent. And sometimes, and I love our trainers are in our industry, but you certainly can find some web-based products that are very aged or dated, and what you're looking for, something that is a fresh, cutting edge, and they do that. So the tool of tools, a combination of two tools, a payment standard tool, which helps the housing authority determine the potential repercussions of future payment standard changes. So again, as you kind of look out into the future and try to make the best judgments, that's another cool I'm looking for another word for tool, but I'm losing it on it right now. You just said, another thing for you to have available as you're conducting the sophisticated analysis that you do. Likewise, that the what they call the HAT, the HCV analysis tool, which provides a PDF overview of your voucher program, including PHA to state and PHA to country comparisons, which is helpful relative to positioning yourself, because I think sometimes we can kind of get in a box and go, I think we're doing pretty good compared to what? And well, our story is not the same as everybody's story wherever you are in the country. The relative comparison is informative, and it leads you to consider what variables might exist. Tighter rental markets, which Houston has been tightening, but was historically, while it's been expensive for a while, there used to be more available units, and then it got very tight, and then lately we're seeing a little bit of expansion again. And that affects, what folks are charging. So we're in an interesting moment, and I wonder writ large, the long-term effects. This is really probably what we've just experienced in 2020 is a signature event of our lifetimes, and will have ramifications for, at least the next decade, if not longer. And so as we consider to look at what it does to what we do, tools like this help us, as well as the pick drill down that allows us to analyze the tenant level data in pick. And, Jonathan or Alan, let me go to Alan here. Do you have any comments on that you want to make?
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it all, Mark. Great. I do have an example of the PDF if, share screening is possible, but if not, we can proceed.
Oh, Hattie, can you have Alan share his screen so we can see that?
Yes, I sure can. Let me make him a co-host.
Thank you kindly.
Hey, this is Chuck Bunkers again. The hat tool way at the bottom there, that number 2 tool, if you've never run that thing is the coolest thing. It tells you who's over vouchered, who's over housed, who's paying more than or claiming more than 40% of their income towards childcare, towards medical, who's claiming childcare without having any income, different things like that. If you haven't ever run that, do it. It's kind of cool. It's a little bit to run it, but once you do it, it's the things you see, you go, wow, okay, that helps.
Well, that's a great plug, Chuck. And the other thing that we've heard is that, and I get this is a lot, that the FMC reps will run that for you. Is that still happening, Chuck? Just, for those who want some help the first time.
It's yeah, they will if you ask them to, without a doubt. I run it for mine regularly and send it to them and stuff like that. But it's kind of neat to, once you learn how to do it, it's pretty simple to do. And the things you learn from it are eye-opening to me.
Take us through this, Alan, real quickly from the top. You're on page 2.
Yeah, so no problem. That was a great leeway, Chuck and Mark. So this is a PDF product or a final product. It will it'll give you basically the first page is going to be the overall general demographics of your housing authority jurisdiction. Of course, like as Mark said, some PHAs might have similar demographics, some may not. And just because, San Antonio and Dallas and Houston might have a similarity, that doesn't mean that we should, we should approach or have the same strategy on what to do. And each, public housing authorities know what's best for their market and their jurisdiction. So using this data, I think it's good to have how different housing authorities come up with different strategies. So right here, the first page, it shows, the racial breakdowns, tenant age, the percentage of disabled, non-disabled, adjusted monthly income, homeless at admission, new admissions at income, and then different unit types. And then second page is, so it digs actually more into the rent burden and how, a comparison down here is how we're, how your jurisdiction, right? So TX005, this blue line is where we are at. So we have about 75% of folks in our voucher program, that has a rent burden of 30% or less, which is a good sign. And then you can track that throughout and compare yourself to the U.S. average and also the state average. On the third page, other data such as rental costs, family contribution, utility allowances. And right here is what Chuck mentioned about, paying more than 40% for medical, number of paying more than 40% for childcare, whatnot, which also then is compared against the U.S. average, Texas average, and then the jurisdiction, your public housing average. And then fourth page here is also other PUC driver data. And then lastly, this is important here too. It shows you more of the, data related to leasing. And right here, you can actually see the voucher holder placement by poverty rate. So basically we can see that about, 15% or maybe, 10 to 15% of the folks are actually, living in a poverty area that's 40% or above. So we want to try to, diversify and make sure that people are living in, low poverty, high opportunity areas. So depending on that, maybe, you can housing authorities can strategize where to lease up or, where to focus their housing at. That's it.
Anybody, and I know we've been talking a lot. I'm rating myself low on encouraging our audience to jump in. Does anybody have I'm about to go to key takeaways. Does anybody have any questions up until this point or thoughts? Let me go back to sharing the screen here. Can you guys see it okay? And trying to get it to move forward. So, again, at a high level, I think it's important, to breathe in this moment and recognize that you guys are doing an incredibly complicated job under unusually arduous conditions. If nobody said it to you today, I appreciate your continuing devotion to the folks that you serve. We've said it before, but I don't know if anybody's put it to you this way. COVID-19 has left no safe place in our lives and has put a layer of stress on us everywhere we possibly could be, at work, at home, whether we're shopping, whether we're trying to navigate our kids in school. And that stress is disproportionately felt by folks who have disproportionately less resources, which is the families that you long ago committed to serving on a daily basis. So, from them too, if they haven't said it to you recently, they appreciate you continue to hang in. Payment standards, subsidy standards, rent burdens, vouchers on the street, these all combine to create this really challenging environment that you would be trying to balance informally without a formal tool like the 2-year tool. And so, getting to know it, even if it's not sort of your natural instinct, and kind of the way that I do things is if I'm not good at something, I find somebody to work with me that is good at it. I often say I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I know who the smartest woman is, and I store stuff in her head. That way, when I need it, I can get it. So have a good set of resources available to you. Your HUD field office is outstanding. They are all experts in what they do in terms of providing additional insight to you so that you can address the various scenarios as they come up. And one of the things is that we continue to expect the unexpected. So scenarios that you thought you might never face, in my experience in this industry, I wouldn't be surprised if you face at some point. I mentioned, as this, indicates as well, you can get that great advice from the field office, but you can also get it from your peers. So I enjoy having conversations like this. I enjoy having side conversations with folks one-on-one about the issues. Jonathan and Alan are always available to have similar conversations. Patty and Shelley are available to guide you to folks in your area if you don't, otherwise have somebody on your list. There's a ton of data that's going to help you determine the best payment standards. We encourage you to find ways to master it. Obviously, that was one of the designs of this presentation. Reviewing that available information will help you guide payments standard setting. That's particularly important right now. If you're a calendar year, fiscal year PHA, as you go through the process of, this is our time for resetting payment standards, I should say. And so that's the kind of thing we would be looking at, and in our case, have a rent survey commission to try to take advantage of what we think will be an opportunity to see additional funding. And being informed about the various inputs. And this tool, I think, is fairly clear in pointing you in the right direction related to those inputs that are important to look at and cause shifts in your projections. And without going too much further, I think, again, we have an opportunity. I think we got about 15, 16 minutes left to engage any questions you might have. I don't know if between Jonathan, Allen, and Chuck, we might have one other example, but other than that, kind of opening it to what your thoughts are and encouraging your feedback, whether in chat or otherwise.
Be sure to unmute yourself if you have any questions. We appreciate it. Edinburgh's asking if they can find the tool on HUD.gov, and you sure can. You should have been given this PowerPoint, which has it in it. It shows you where to go. But yes, HUD.gov, program offices of public housing, and then go down to the tools, and it will open up to where you need to go, and click on the 2-year tool. It opens it up. You put in your TX number, your PHA number, and then that opens the actual 2-year tool. And then from there, you can populate that tool with the VMS data that you pulled out of VMS. Okay. One other thing I want to add for everybody, do this tool early in the year. You don't want to first try it in June and find out, oh, I'm way behind the 8 ball. I got to try to catch up. The problem is it's hard to catch up. Your best to start is early in the year running this tool. If you are comfortable and you don't think you need it every month, that's fine. But I would recommend a minimum of quarterly, but start early in the year so you know if I need to get some vouchers out there to fully utilize this program, do it early in the year. It's really hard to catch up down the road.
Very well said. I'd even go one louder, Chuck, and just say that now is a perfect time for 2021. Because as you look into that, to the extent you have, and your situation again may be different. It depends on how long it takes you on average to successfully lease someone. But if you're in a situation where you're 2021, and again, then I'm talking about we run calendar year, that it makes perfect sense to start three months early on that year, or even, of course, we're running it all the time, but just in terms of how you frame what the upcoming period is. The more lead time, the better.